Are you hearing contradictory reports about climate change? Are some of those reports claiming that 97% of scientists agree that the climate is changing and that it's caused by humans? And then there are other reports that claim 32,000 scientists disagree with that. Well, in this video, we're going to get to the bottom of that. And we're going to see if there is a consensus on climate change. I'm Monte, the host of Savvy Life Strategies. I invite you to hit the subscribe button and to click the notification bell to get more videos just like this. Now, why should you believe me? I'm going to put a link down in the description that will tell you about my background. Essentially, I'm a physicist. I've worked in the field of integrated circuits for over 30 years with a number of patents in that area. And I also have published 4 books on science, and I have another book coming out in November. With that said, I would like to now address the question, what do the surveys say about climate change? Specifically, is there a consensus on climate change? Well, you might have heard that 97% of scientists believe that the climate is changing and that change is caused by humans. Well, first, let's look at the pie chart that says 97% of scientists agree that there's climate change. I'll roll that in now. This is a pie chart from the Consensus Project, and it claims to be peer-reviewed. Now let's discuss what peer-reviewed means. Peer-reviewed in the context of a scientific journal means that if you submit a paper, before it will be published, it will be reviewed by other scientists who are also published in that journal or other scientific journals, and that they are acknowledged to be experts. If your paper is looked at and agreed to be sound from a scientific viewpoint, then the journal will publish it. Otherwise, they'll reject the paper. That's what it means to be peer-reviewed. Now, in the context of this website, the Consensus Project, it's not clear what peer-reviewed means. I think it would be better to look at where did this 97% of scientists number come from? All right, so let's go back a little bit and take a look at that. The first that you'll see is that a person by the name of Naomi Oreskes, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, a professor of science and an affiliated professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences at Harvard University. So she is associated with Harvard University. Solid credentials. In a brief article, she looked at 928 papers containing the keywords global climate change. And what did they say? Well, she wrote that none of the scientists disagreed with the consensus position, namely that climate change was caused by humans. However, not disagreeing isn't the same as agreeing. In 2007, Oreskes wrote a chapter of a book, and that book's title was Climate Change, What It Means for You, Your Children, and Your Grandchildren. In that chapter, she revealed that there were 235 papers that, in that former survey, 25% endorsed the position. They actually came out and said, yeah, there's climate change and humans are causing it. 50% talked about the impacts of climate change, and she assumed that that was, in effect, tacit approval. And 25% had no position. In addition, in the chapter, Oreskes said that some of the authors that she counted might believe that the current climate change is natural. So now, can we believe the 97% number? Not from what Oreskes published. The second piece of data comes from John Cook and his associates. And John Cook is a climate communications fellow at the Global Change Institute at the University of Queensland, Australia. And he wrote a 2013 paper qualifying the consensus on anthropogenic global warming. Now, anthropogenic, that's a big word, but it means caused by humans, global warming in the scientific literature. What did their study say? Well, they looked at 12,000 papers that talked about climate change, and they looked for the keyword phrase global climate change or global warming. And they found that 66%, 2/3 of the abstracts with those keywords actually had no position on what caused climate change. However, 1/3, roughly 1/3, did have a position and attributed it to humans. Now, 0.7% rejected it, that it wasn't caused by humans, and 0.3% said that they were uncertain about it. So what can we conclude? We can conclude that of the papers that took a position on global warming, 97% of those papers attributed it to humans. Now, as you probably know, and as you probably have guessed, this has been a contentious subject. So in 2016, Cook and his colleagues did a survey of surveys, and they looked at 14 published surveys. What did they find? Well, they argued that there was a scientific consensus among 90 to 100% of the scientists, depending on the exact question, the timing, and the sampling methodology. I also looked at those surveys, and I found that half of the surveys, were below 97%. However, the lowest was 84%. So I would say that of the ones they looked at, the surveys they looked at, somewhere between 80 and 90% thought that climate change was caused by humans. Now, you might have seen stories that 32,000 scientists, 30,000 plus scientists disagree that climate change is caused by humans. And there was a petition that started back in 1998, and they did a polling, and they said, well, do you think that climate change is caused by humans? And I'm going to put up that petition right now so you could take a look at it. But basically, they counted just about everybody that had any degree at all in science, whether they had any expertise in the climate or any expertise related to climate change or how it might be caused or not caused. Basically, the petition says, have you seen any evidence that humans are causing climate change? And of course, a lot of these people who are not in the area of climate science say, well, no, I haven't seen any evidence. I don't think that's a very good way to determine whether or not the climate is changing or whether or not it's caused by humans. Now, you may see articles that say climate change is a hoax, that there is no such thing as climate change, and that claiming that it's caused by humans is a hoax. Well, the petition itself, even signed by those scientists, said nothing about it being a hoax, nothing about it being for profit, that it's being claimed for some profit motive. So those articles that are making that claim are in error. There is one study, though, that I place emphasis on, and that was started in 1988 by the United Nations, and it was sponsored by the World Meteorological Organization and the United Nations Environmental Program. Well, what did that study say? Well, it's a long paper, and I'm going to boil it down to 5 points. They did various assessments from 1988 till 2014. And the last assessment is called the fifth assessment. And they have 5 points in that assessment. The first is that the evidence of humans that are causing climate change is becoming stronger. So they're saying that, well, it's looking like humans are causing climate change. Point two, they said that the forecast for the end of this century, if we stay on the current trends. Now, this is not truly arguable. The sea levels are rising. We have seen an 8-inch rise over the last century or so. The amount of carbon dioxide in the air is increasing beyond what it was since man walked the earth the last 400,000 years. It's going up from 300 parts per million. It hit a new high, and that was just published. In this April of 2018, it was measured at an average of 410 parts per million. So we know the carbon dioxide in the air is actually going up. So they're saying if we stay on the current trend where the sea is increasing, the sea is getting warmer, they've measured that, and the sea is 0.3 of a degree warmer, and that is causing thermal expansion, and icebergs and glaciers are melting, and that's causing fresh water to be added to the ocean, and that's causing sea rise. If we stay on that trend by the end of the century, we're going to have a lot of problems. Then they're calling that challenging. Actually, if we stay on that trend, the coastlines of nations around the world will be unrecognizable. For example, you won't have a Miami Beach. It'll be underwater. The third finding is that it's happening now. And this is the most compelling thing that I think we should be concerned about. When we've experienced climate change in the past, it has been over millennia, thousands of years. We are seeing the same amount of climate change now happening in decades, 10s to 20 years, okay, decades. So the rate of climate change is alarming. So what did they recommend after this? Well, you understand now this is a United Nations group of nations made up of scientists from nations and other figures from nations. And so they recommend political action. It's a United Nations group. And what are they saying for political action? Well, they're pointing to the Paris Climate Accord. Now, as you know, the United States recently withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord. And it's still under consideration, I believe, by President Trump. And we may rejoin it. But they're saying that the Paris Climate Accord is the right direction. They're sort of leaning on that, saying, look, we need to stop the emissions because that group believes that the emissions by humans, essentially carbon dioxide, which comes from burning fossil fuels, is one of the culprits causing climate change. Now, I'd like to give you my opinion. I think the first thing we can say with sincerity is that scientists who understand the climate and are publishing in that area, somewhere upwards of 80 to 90% of them would agree that the climate is changing and that it's being caused by humans. And the important thing is that it's happening very quickly. The rate of change is much faster than we've ever seen in the past. The question I have, and I'm sure a lot of scientists have, and you may have too, are we reaching a tipping point, a point at which the climate is going to go right off the edge and all of a sudden we'll lose control and the oceans will continue to rise, and no matter what we do, we can't reverse that. Now, I don't think we're there. I don't think it's that dire. But I think we have to get serious and take a look at it and say, look, if we stay on the current trend, we've got problems by the end of this century. So if you've got grandchildren, they're going to be experiencing problems related to climate change. Whether or not you believe, or I believe, or anybody believes that it's caused by humans, we have problems related to climate change. And we need to do something about it. I'm going to stop at this point. I'm going to wrap it up and give you an opportunity to read some of the links below and to formulate your own opinion. If you found this informative, I invite you to subscribe for more videos just like this. Click the notification bell. That way you'll be assured of getting a video just as it's published. And most importantly, give it a thumbs up so other people know this is a good video. Until we have a chance to talk again, stay savvy and live well.